Hey tubers, welcome back for another adventure. And it's never a good start when you're looking at the Sunl 110cc and you don't see an engine on it. That means something went wrong. And just to refresh you guys, I bought this thing for $20. The engine was seized. The piston wouldn't go all the way up because there was junk in it. I pulled the engine apart. The rings were seized also. I managed to get them freed up. I gave it a quick hone, inspected the valves, put the whole thing together, and the compression came in a little bit low, just under 90. So I thought, well, it's probably good enough. She'll fire up. I timed it up according to the marks on it, went to start it, and it won't start. It won't pop. It won't fart. It won't even try to start. Hit it with the old starting fluid, and once again, still nothing. So I said to myself, well, maybe I misunderstood the marks for the top dead center. So I retimed it up. I basically moved it up a notch and tried it again, and once again, nothing. I'm getting plenty of spark, so that's not the issue. That's a brandy new carburetor, so that's not the issue. Starting fluid, all that, once again, it will not start. So trying to figure out what's wrong with it, and I was thinking about it last night, and I said, you know what, I own this cylinder leak tester, and that's really something I should have done before, really as soon as it didn't try to start, before I tried to retime it or do any of the other junk. I really should have done a leak back on it. The nice thing is, with the engine off, if I take these two bolts off, I'll be able to hear if anything's leaking right out of here and right out of here. So right out of the exhaust or the intake, right? I'll be able to hear that very easily. If it's got a blown head gasket, I'll be able to hear that also. Or if the rings are so horrible, I don't think so. I mean, they seemed nice and snug. They seemed to seal well. I mean, they got a receipt, but they did seem to seal well. But hey, I know nothing until I do this leak back test. So I'm going to hook this up, and I'll be back in a few. So what I'm doing is kind of a redneck leak back on this thing. My official leak back detector does not have the proper fitting to go into this engine, so I'm just using my compression tester, and it turns out you can plug it right in to a hose, so you don't need to own a leak back checker to do this. Anyway, you set the engine up on top dead center, and you see that little circle right in the center there. That means top dead center. And if you put air into this thing, at top dead center, your valves are supposed to be closed and sealed. Not just closed, sealed. And you should hear nothing coming out of each port. As a matter of fact, chances are what's going to happen is the air pressure, as it builds, it'll push the piston one way or the other. So let me turn the air on and listen. You guys hear that? So I seem to have a leak right up on top here. Hear it gurgling. So it's not a horrible leak. Maybe I just have some material stuck in the valve. It looked clean, it looked good, but maybe that's just not the case. I would have expected the exhaust valve to have the problem, because as the piston came up, it was pushing material, and I figured it would have pushed it into the exhaust valve. Maybe the intake was open during when the rust got in there, and that's what caused the trouble. Actually, the intake had to be open or nothing would have got into the cylinder, right? And if the intake was open, probably the exhaust was closed. That's why I'm not having a problem with the exhaust valve. Actually, it does make sense. So anyway, head has to come off again, and we got to figure out what its issue is. So I pulled the head off, and I don't know, could you guys kind of see in there? It's a little nasty, particularly this one surface right there. Obviously it's rusty, it must not be closing. So I'm gonna give the valves a cleaning and a lapping, and hopefully this thing comes back with better compression and fires right up. I gotta tell you, I inspected them from outside and they look like they were sealing and they all looked good, but obviously that just is not true. So time to fix them. So I used my Redneck spring compressor, valve spring compressor, and I got the retainers out of the way, and that's what the valve looks like, and that's what the seat looks like. Obviously that needs to be cleaned up, so why don't we get on to that. And then I do have the lapping tool here and the lapping compound, so we'll clean it up and lap it. Well, what I'm going to do is get the exhaust valve out of there first, and we'll end up having to do both. Hopefully the suction cup goes small enough to grab onto these. When one uses lapping compound, make sure you clean it up really well, because if you leave some behind, it's designed to cut metal, right? And if it keeps cutting and cutting and cutting, you can end up cutting a passage where you don't want it, i.e. you might ruin the valve seat, the valve guide, or it could get in the engine bore and prematurely wear that down. So whenever you use compound there, valve lapping compound, make sure you clean up well. Okay, here's the exhaust valve on that same engine, and you can see it's much cleaner. No rust, like the intake there. So I'm just going to clean these up, polish them up, get all the compound out of there, and hopefully we're all good. So you put a little bit of valve grinding compound on the valve, and you put it back in the head. I put a little WD-40 on the guide area. You know, the suction cup, you give it a twist. This suction cup's actually a little bit big, so I had to kind of help it with my fingers by spinning the valve retaining side. What I'm going to do tonight is order another one of these cups, one for small engines, one's that's a lot smaller. So anyway, both valves are cut at this point, ground at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take them apart again and clean them up. I got a bunch of I got a fresh laundried rag t-shirt, nice and white, and I cut it into little pieces, and I'm going to use it to clean things up. Once again, when it comes to grinding valves, cleanliness is very important. I was not happy with the way the intake valve cut with the suction cup. Quite honestly, it really didn't do a good job. So given this is the smallest suction cup that I have, I had to Rube Goldberg it and go with a little hose extension on the back of the valve to get it to cut. Anyway, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes cutting it. I just really wasn't happy. It appeared as if the seat had some pits in it. I mean, I'm grinding the valve, so to speak. What this really needs is a cut. It needs the right bit to go in there and actually take a little material off, and then to lap them. So, But that's not what I own, so I'm doing the best I can. So I finished the valve work, right? I did a little lapping on the valves, and I'm going to do a quick wet compression test on it. If you guys remember, it was coming in about 80 before. So it's coming in just under 100 now. For these engines, that's about what's expected. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to smash a carburetor onto it and my portable ignition box, and I'm going to try to fire it up right on the bench, right where it sits. Okay, the engine's put together, carburetor, portable CDI box, jump box, starting fluid, the good stuff. So let's turn power on for the ignition box. Generous on the starting fluid, and we have it was either going to start or I was going to blow it up, one or the other. Luckily it started. Obviously it runs. Boy, this engine's just been nothing but trouble for me. I am curious, now that it ran a little bit, if the compression came up a little more and what the story on this thing is going to be. This engine put up a real fight for me. I did finally get it running, which is good, but I had to mess with the valves and the timing and the changing carbs and a portable CDI box, and you name it, this engine took it. But I still got it. I got it running. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for coming along with me for this journey. Remember, feet down, heads up, and get out there and enjoy each and every day. Bye now.